Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's EPA Grants Workshop. I'm Brian Gavidia, District Director for Congressman Tony Cárdenas. As a reminder to all guests, this webinar is being translated live into Spanish. To take advantage of the translation services, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom right. You should see it next to the raise hand feature. Un recordatorio que este evento está siendo traducido al español. Para usar esta función, por favor, use el botón de interpretación bajo de este Zoom, cerca de la función, el icono de función de mano. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Matthew Tejeda, Deputy Assistant Administrator for Environmental Justice within EPA's National Program Office for Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. Dr. Tejeda joined EPA in March of 2013 as a career senior executive and director of the Office of Environmental Justice, OEJ, a position he held until the reorganization of OEJ into OEJ-ECR in September of 2022. As DAA, Matthew provides leadership for EPA's EJ portfolio, including the integration of EJ throughout all of EPA's policies, programs, activities, and coordination and alignment of EJ priorities with the external civil rights programmatic priorities, in addition to leading EJ efforts with other federal agencies, states, tribes, local government, and other stakeholders. Before his career at EPA, Dr. Tejeda spent over 5 years as the executive director of the Environmental Justice Advocacy Air Alliance Houston in the Houston and Texas Gulf Coast area. Dr. Tejeda received his master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Oxford, where he was a member of St. Anthony's College, and a Bachelor of Arts in English from the University of Texas at Austin. Then he served 2 years in the Peace Corps in Bulgaria. Dr. Tejeda is a native of Fort Worth, Texas, and lives with his wife, Andrea, in Silver Spring, Maryland, and is the proud father of Nia Tejeda. Dr. Tejeda, thank you for joining us. I'll pass it to you to deliver remarks and for your presentation.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate that. Brian and I just met like 5 seconds ago, and it's actually Matthew Tejeda. Those damn Tejedas are always trying to steal our thunder. But I'm very happy to be with everyone today. I'm going to share a presentation and give some folks kind of an overview of some of the big environmental justice focused programs we have coming out of EPA. As Brian shared, before I came to EPA, I actually ran a community-based EJ organization in Houston, Texas. It's called Air Alliance Houston. We worked on air quality issues up and down the Houston Ship Channel and the Texas Gulf Coast. I actually used to be an applicant to the grants that I now give out. I was a multi-time unsuccessful applicant to the grants I now give out. So I'm very happy to be in a position over the last 10 years to be able to provide grants and also really to work to make those grants more accessible, more equitable, to get funding to more organizations at the community level that are trying to get a grant for the first time. I know exactly what it feels like to struggle to try to get the grant for the first time to do those community-driven projects. And today is a really, well, not today specifically, but in general, right, we're in this really historic time. When I used to apply to those grants in the EJ program, and even for most of my time at EPA, our environmental justice grants that were really targeted at communities and in local community-based organizations, you know, we had about $1.5 million a year for those grant programs. And that was one of the biggest EJ grant programs in the United States, $1.5 million a year. But of course, that's nothing, right? $1.5 million a year for a national grant competition is nothing. And I'm very happy to be able to share with y'all that reality has definitely changed. Because today, we have billions of dollars that we will be giving out for environmental justice communities and their partners to work on actually fixing legacy generational challenges of inequity and injustice that have been facing our communities for so long. So we received at EPA $3 billion through the Inflation Reduction Act. 2.8 billion of that will go out in the form of grants to communities and their partners, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. $200 million of that is just for technical assistance for communities to be able to apply and then really effectively implement those grants. And then also at the EPA, the program I've been running for a long time, our budget typically for many, many years was about $12 million a year. So that had to pay salaries for about 30 staff. It had to pay rent. A lot of people don't realize that once you're in the government, you still pay rent. You pay the government rent from the government. You have to pay the bills and everything. So that $12 million went up to $100 million and then $108 million in the last couple of budgets. So that gives us over, $3 billion that is going to be coming out of EPA right now and over the next few years in the forms of grants and technical assistance. And what this level of funding has enabled us to do for the first time at EPA is to finally answer what EJ leaders and EJ communities have been asking for and demanding for decades, right? An actual holistic community support system. And that is what we are building at EPA. We're building that holistic community support system where wherever a community is on their trajectory towards actually solving for and fixing those generational impacts from inequitable and unjust policies and practices and laws and institutions, so we're going to have funding for folks that are ready to start actually spending tens of millions of dollars in their community, all the way down to, communities that are just starting out, communities that are just, hearing about social justice or equity for the first time, communities that are just starting to get organized so that they can start to attack those issues that have been so challenging in their communities for so long. So I wanted to start by talking about, some of those elements that are already out on the street or that will be coming out in the next couple of months. And really it's kind of in the next couple of months, October and November is when most of these things are going to actually be ready and available and start to come out for folks to use. So the first thing that we have put together, and this is actually already out on the street, and they're starting to open their doors. And it's really kind of the backbone of this entire multi-part holistic community support program. It's our EJ Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers, or the TICTACs. The TICTACs, again, are something that EJ leaders had been demanding for a long time. And it's a pretty simple idea. It's that, the communities that need and deserve government funding and government support the most have the least ability to get in the game, right? They have some real basic capacity constraints to just start getting grants and to start implementing projects, and that communities really need access to support to overcome that initial barrier. And that's what the EJ TICTACs are going to do. So there are 13 regionally based EJ TICTACs with over 150 partners spread out across the United States. There are also 3 national EJ TICTACs that are going to be working to kind of backstop and fill in and coordinate across the entire United States. They're made up of community-based organizations and academic institutions with relationships in their communities. And they're going to be focused on providing a real basic service. They're going to be the ground floor front door all you got to do is knock or call or email, right? No application is necessary. There's no fee to use these. They'll be providing free services to communities, and those services are very clear, right? They're going to do things like providing grant writing assistance, right? They're going to train folks on how to write grants, or they'll give feedback on folks that have already written their grants. They're not going to write the grants, right? It's part of the capacity building that the communities need to learn how to write their own grants, but they're going to be there to train them, right? And to give them input on the grants that they're writing. They're going to help communities just with the, getting into the government system, SAMS.gov and Dun & Bradstreet and grants.gov, right? There's all these systems that you have to navigate to apply for a grant. They're going to help communities start to form partnerships, right? So if a community-based organization doesn't really know how to talk to their municipal planning or their metropolitan planning organization or the utility or an academic institution, right? They'll be there to help facilitate communities talking to their partners. And then one of the other big things that they're going to do is they're going to help communities just figure out, where should they apply, right? The government is frankly a mess. There's thousands of different programs. There's thousands of different grants and technical assistance. There's private philanthropy. There's state programs in many instances. And we put the burden on communities to navigate that and to try to figure out, well, which program best matches the needs of my communities. So we're going to try to take that burden off of communities, and the Tic Tacs are going to help kind of navigate folks to the best resource that matches their needs. So that's what the Tic Tacs are going to focus on. Again, we already have 13 regionally based Tic Tacs have already been awarded. They're starting to open their doors. You can just Google EJ Tic Tacs, and you can go to a website in EPA that gives you all the information about who these Tic Tacs are, where these Tic Tacs are. We're going to be putting out more information really soon about how to access them, which ones have their doors open, which ones are still working to get their doors open. This is stuff that we are developing for the first time ever in our history right now. So we're working to get all of those things kind of opened up and deployed right now. The next thing that we're doing, and this is something we're going to announce in November, right? Because while we're out there giving free technical assistance to communities to start to get going, we recognize that communities also need money, right? Communities need financial assistance. But there's a huge barrier to communities that are just starting out to get that financial assistance from the government, because our applications are really difficult. And even if we did everything that we could do within our power to make them simpler, our statutes and our other requirements from Congress and from everyone else, a government grant is never going to be an easy thing to apply to. They are inherently really difficult. And especially when you're talking about getting a small amount of money, right? $150,000 or $250,000 just to get going. It's a really high barrier for communities that are just getting started to be able to get that amount of money to go through that entire federal application and acquisition process. So what we are doing and what we will announce in November is we've taken over $500 million of that Inflation Reduction Act money, and we're actually going to put it out in big grants, kind of like the Tic Tacs. We're going to establish a nationwide network of regional and at least one national grant makers. So they've already gone through the process of applying to us. They're going through the process right now of us awarding them the funds. We're going to announce who those entities are in November, and then we'll award them. They'll each have about $50 million, and they will then turn around and they will give away that $50 million in small increments between $150,000 and $350,000. What that'll do is it means that communities that need that smaller amount of funding, instead of coming to us and having that huge burden of applying for a small grant just from EPA, from the federal government, they'll be able to go to one of those external grant makers who will have a much simpler application process, and they'll also have a much quicker turnaround time. right? Even with us, even if it's just $150,000, it still takes 9 or 10 months for us to turn that around and actually put the money out on the street for the community. So we're already going through that, right? That's what we're actually doing right now, is working through getting those big chunks of money out to those grant makers so that they, again, can turn around. They'll have a much simpler application and a much quicker turnaround time to actually make those awards in more places at a much quicker rate. This should enable us to make thousands of sub-awards over the next several years all across the United States. So those grant makers are coming out again in November. We're going to announce them. We're hoping that they're open for business and actually start making those sub-awards at the beginning of next year, right? So that communities can go to them and start accessing that money in a way that works better for capacity constrained communities. Now, I talked about the special or the really basic technical assistance that the TIC tacs are going to be giving out, right? And we're going to keep them focused on that really basic form of technical assistance that tens of thousands of communities across the United States need. But a lot of communities, you know, that's not where they're at anymore, right? They're doing the basics. They're organized. They've got an organization. They have a budget. They know how to apply for grants, right? What they need to start working on are some big grants, right? They need to start putting together like actual big financial implementation scale projects to fix their water, you know, to fix their waste issues, to start dealing with the impacts of climate change, to bring resilience into their communities, to bring adaptation into their communities, to do things like solar or green infrastructure for flooding or whatever it might be, right? A lot of communities need to start actually building those really big, complicated proposals. So we're going to have more specialized forms of technical assistance, and the TIC tacs will help folks get that if that's what they need. There'll also be other ways that people can just access that technical assistance directly. But we're going to have other forms of technical assistance that provide those experts to do the planning and the project development and work through the financial pieces of, okay, if you get $20 million here and this is what your tax code does, and here's something that Treasury has available, like to have the experts to come together with the communities and actually build those big kind of multifaceted proposals that'll bring in millions of dollars into the community. And those experts will also be there when we award those grants, you know, because there's a big burden of reporting and tracking and communicating once we give a grant. So those technical experts are going to be available to communities that receive a big award to actually implement it effectively, right? And to try to lessen some of the burden of doing the reporting, and also to make sure just the reporting really is done really effectively. I mean, one of the things that we really want to prove here to Congress and to everyone else is that investing taxpayer dollars in this way is a really good use of taxpayer dollars, right? That we're really on top of it. It isn't wasted, and it goes to actually fixing some of the hardest issues to fix in the United States, because it's linked to those generations of disinvestment and oppression and being dumped upon. So actually using taxpayer dollars now is a really good way for communities to start being in charge of creating a vision of their future and actually being able to implement solutions that support that vision of a better future for themselves. And that's the big thing that we're working on right now. And it should actually be out. It says late summer here. It's actually going to come out hopefully in October. We're calling it the Community Change Grant. And this is going to be the grant that the majority of the Inflation Reduction Act money flows through. Approximately $2 billion of that $2.8 billion is going to come out in these environment and climate justice community change grants. So these are grants that people are going to have to come to EPA to apply for, because they're going to be pretty big grants, right? They're going to be between $10 and $20 million per grant. So if you're a community that is thinking about, you know, being able to operate at that scale, you know, it's not too big a burden for them to come directly to EPA to apply for them. But even at that, we're trying to make that application as simple and as straightforward as possible. And a few of the ways that we're trying to do that: one, we're We're going to have all that technical assistance out there to help people create really good proposals, right? Another thing that we're doing is when we open this competition up in the next few weeks, it's not going to be one of those grant competitions that has one deadline and everybody, steams toward that one deadline and everyone applies all at the same time. We're going to do something that communities have asked for a long time. We're going to have a 12-month open application period, right? So whenever a community and their partners are ready to come in and apply to a grant, they'll be able to. That 12-month open window is going to be on a rolling basis. So whenever communities are ready, they apply. As soon as they apply, we start scoring it. And even when we start scoring it, we're going to have a two-phase process for it, right? So we're going to have a paper application first that has, just the facts, the names of the organizations involved, the budget, kind of what the project is all about and where the project's going to be. And as long as all that paper exercise is all good, we're then going to invite folks in for an oral interview, because we want to be able to talk directly to the community, right? We want to hear from the community. Well, the city is really good. They work with us, or this academic institution, they're a great partner and they're supporting us and they're going to do this piece. And this is what the sustainability is. And this is the problem really affecting our community. We want to be able to hear and talk directly to the community and try to get rid of all those professional grant writers, that the more affluent community organizations use, or the more affluent environmental organizations use, right? We want to hear directly from the community organizations and the community leaders and talk directly to them about what the project is. And as long as that's all good and everything scores good, we're gonna award those grants as quickly as we get them in, right? We're going to be turning them around constantly during that 1-year application period. We're also, though, again, because I used to be a failed grant applicant. I was a really good failed grant applicant, and it used to drive me crazy. I know how much time and effort and energy it takes in using relationships to put together even small grant applications. And then you put it in and you wait and you hear back months later, you didn't get it. And it's just like, well, I wasted all this time, right? Like, why didn't I get it? Why can't I get it? And you never really know. So this application period, what it's going to allow us to do is when we get a proposal in, if it doesn't score sufficiently high enough for us to award it, we're going to immediately debrief the applicants, and they're going to be able to reapply. They're going to be able to revise their application and put it back into us, right? Because if a community is spending all of that time putting together one of these proposals, they deserve to get the money as long as we can get it to the place where it scores high enough that we have the confidence that it can be done. So we're going to give folks a second bite at the apple. That's something that doesn't happen very often. I don't know if it ever happens in government grants, but we really don't want people sinking all that cost into these grants and then not getting them. A few other things about the grants. So they will be between $10 and $20 million a piece. 10 million, because we really want 10 million is the minimum, because we really want, projects that are actually going to be able to change conditions on the ground. We want communities to be better after these grants go out. The cap is $20 million. And the reason for the cap of $20 million is because in the actual Inflation Reduction Act, in the statute, any grant we give out can only last 3 years. We cannot, you can't ask us for a 4th year. You can't say, well, hold on. We just need a couple more months. Like at the end of 3 years, if you haven't spent all the money, it comes back to us, which is doubly bad because we have to have spent all of this money by September 30th, 2026. It's already September 22nd, 2023. So even if I was giving grants out right now, they can't come back in 2025 or 2026 because I'm not going to be able to give it back out to somebody else. That money's going to poof disappear. So we're setting that 20 million because we think realistically, and based upon a lot of research we've done and engaging with a lot of community leaders, that's a realistic amount of money, kind of the upper end of the realistic amount of money that we think communities are going to be able to implement in 3 years or less. Another thing about who can apply for these grants, So the key for these grants is a community-based organization has got to be one of the lead partners, right? Everything about these grants, none of the money goes out unless the community is involved. So we're requiring a partnership. And that partnership can be between a community-based organization and another community-based organization. You know, we think that grants of this size, you know, you're going to need other partners in there as well, but the main partners can just be two community-based organizations, or it can be a community-based organization with either a local government, a community-based organization with a tribal government, or a community-based organization with an academic institution, right? An institution of higher education, like a university or college, right? So those are the only eligible applicants for this. There can be other folks that are partners, like sub-partners, states, or even like private businesses or whoever else. They can be sub-partners, but the eligibility that will allow a project to be proposed, it has to be a partnership between a community-based organization or a community-based organization with a local government or a tribe or an institution of higher education. Now, the last piece about it is you're going to be able to do a lot of different things with these grants. All right, but part of the requirements are going to be is that you work on minimizing pollution and adapting or building resilience to climate change, right? So we really want multifaceted projects or proposals that have many projects in them, so that it's really working both on reducing pollution and battling climate change, right? Better community resilience or adaptation to climate change. There's other things in there too about, you know, the community's got to be engaged. There's a workforce element. For the first time ever, the EJ program at EPA is able to actually fund workforce projects. The workforce projects have to be related to air quality and climate change, but we can actually fund workforce projects, right? So there's a number of different things that you can do. The two big requirements are that the proposals have to be about reducing pollution and increasing community resilience or adaptation to climate change. So other than that, there's a lot of flexibility around what is actually allowable in the grant. We have a website up already. If you just Google EPA EJ Community Change Grant, you'll go to a website that has pretty much the information I just spoke out to you all. You can go to the website and you can get all of that information. Again, our goal is to release this competition in October, and that'll open up the year-long competition window. So I think that's my last slide. That is my last slide. So I'm going to take that down. I see there's hands raised. There's probably some questions. So happy to stay on and engage with folks and try to answer as many questions as I can.
Thank you, Dr. Tejada. We are going to leave questions until the end of the presentations, if that's okay with you. Sure. Okay. So if you have a question, please drop it in the chat, and we will get to as many questions as possible after the presentations. Now, I would like to introduce Mr. Jack Groark, Senior Advisor for Infrastructure at the EPA. Jack is a senior policy and management professional with more than a decade of extensive experience in public policy and government decision-making. Currently serving as senior advisor for infrastructure at EPA, Jack focuses on bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act implementation in the Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs. Prior to EPA, Jack served as Deputy Chief of Staff and Infrastructure Implementation Coordinator for Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf. As senior staffer for Governor Wolf and Senator Bob Casey, Jack has been involved with every aspect of state and federal government program policies and budgets. Jack, thank you for joining us today. I'll pass it to you for your remarks and your presentation.
Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate it and really appreciate you and the Congressman giving us this opportunity today to talk about some of our programs, and thanks for my colleague Matt on all the information he shared. Going after him is going to be challenging, as you were very fortunate to see him. He's such an expert at this work, so I will try to follow up to that and give you some more information. So just sort of want to do an overarching theme on our work on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Both of these pieces of legislation represent a historic investment in the mission of EPA and are designed to have a significant impact on the health and environment in communities across the country. We're very grateful for the work of the White House, Congress, and all of the committees for their support of the important work of EPA. And we're dedicated to implementing and managing all of these resources with transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness in order to achieve meaningful results for the American people. So, traditionally EPA is a $10 billion a year agency that now has over $130 billion to deploy, thanks to President Biden and congressional leadership. This breaks down into $60 billion for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, $41.5 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act, and some additional revenue from reinstated tax provisions in both bills. To date, we've deployed a little over $10 billion in funding. This has been mostly in the form of water capitalization grants, clean school bus awards that funded 2,500 buses that went to 400 school districts in 3 territories. EPA was the first agency to award IRA funding when we announced $53 million last November for community air monitoring projects. This is the nation's largest ever investment in air monitoring. This was a combination of IRA funding and American Rescue Plan funding. In addition to our infrastructure funding, we are quickly working to implement our IRA programs, many of which are new and highly complex. We remain on track to make most of the funding available at the end of this year, early next year. So just a breakdown on some of our infrastructure funding. It's sort of divided into 3 categories. We have the bulk of it is water investments. This breaks down into $23.4 billion for traditional clean water and drinking water revolving loan funds, $15 billion dedicated to lead pipe replacement, and $10 billion to addressing emerging contaminants like PFAS. One thing I want to flag for our water programs, we have a significant amount of technical assistance for our water programs. You can learn more about that on the website. I'll have links later in this presentation that you can click on to go to our website. Communities can sign up for technical assistance to learn more about our water programs. We also have funding for environmental cleanup. This is $3.5 billion for the Superfund program. This allowed us to clear the EPA's backlog on Superfund sites, get a lot of sites moving, and get more sites in the pipeline. $1.5 billion for the Brownfields program. We are targeting new communities that haven't benefited from this program, so we also have a lot of technical assistance available there. You can learn more on our website. $375 million for solid waste infrastructure. Just last week, the administrator announced awards that went to most states for waste and recycling programs, and also some competitive awards that went to 24 communities across the country. I also touched on our clean school bus program. We did a round of that last year, a rebate program. We did a competitive grant program round earlier this year, and we expect to do another round of the rebate program later this year as well. It's a great program to replace old diesel buses, and we've already had a lot of success stories there. Encourage you to check out our website, learn more about our opportunities in that space. This is just sort of a more detailed breakdown of our infrastructure programs. A lot of the programs I mentioned. We also have a number of geographic water programs as well. That just wanted to share the bulk of all the information we have here on a lot of programs. So onto the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA makes historic investments in climate action that are expected to reduce our emissions by 40% by 2030, while supporting disadvantaged communities and the clean energy industrial base. Our investments are designed to drive significant emissions reductions over the next decade while laying the groundwork for long-term decarbonization in hard-to-abate sectors. EPA is playing a key role in delivering these programs. As I mentioned earlier, we received $41.5 billion in funding for these programs. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on this. I know Matt already touched on the environmental justice block grants and all of our grants in that space, so I won't talk about those, but the bulk of our Inflation Reduction Act funding goes to 6 new programs, 98% of that funding. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that. First and the largest is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This program is currently open. It is 3 separate competitions: a $7 billion Solar for All competition, a $14 billion National Clean Investment competition, and a $6 billion Clean Energy Investment Accelerator. This is new programs, helps reduce greenhouse gases. These different sub-grants, different folks are eligible for different ones. Encourage you to learn more on our website about that. But the Solar for All specifically is geared for states and municipalities and tribes. The other two are more geared for nonprofits and organizations that have experience doing funding work. Climate pollution reduction grants. This is a $5 billion program. This is a 2-phase program. Earlier this year, we did the first phase where states and MSAs could opt in to receive planning grants. The state of California did opt in and receive $3 million in planning. Many MSAs in California also did opt in as well. Opting into the first phase of this program makes them eligible for the implementation phase, which launched earlier this week. This is competitive grants to fund projects across the country that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and can help communities implement their climate plans. So a lot more information on our website. Encourage you to check that out as well. Clean Ports Program. We have a grant program to reduce air pollution at ports. This is a $3 billion program that will award rebates and grants for ports to purchase and install zero emissions technology and develop climate action plans. The Methane Emission Reduction Program. This is a $1.5 billion program to fund grants and technical assistance to accelerate emissions reduction from oil and natural gas systems. Earlier this year, we launched the first phase of this program, which was allocations to states for them to work on or plugging their methane emitting wells. There'll be a second phase of this program at some point later this year, early next year. So be on the lookout for that. And last is the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicles Program. This is a $1 billion program that provides grants, rebates, contract supports to replace heavy duty vehicles with zero emissions alternatives. I should also mention for both the Clean Ports Program and the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle Program, there's a set aside for areas that are not attainment areas. Those are areas that aren't in attainment with EPA clean air standards. So, I know there's areas in California which would qualify for that, and there's specific money set aside in these competitions for those areas. This is just a further breakdown of our programs across the Inflation Reduction Act. Many of the programs I mentioned, we also have funding for Clean Air Act grants, for quality sensors, permitting and approvals process, the diesel emissions reduction program, and a number of other programs. Just a lot of opportunities out there in the space, and we're continuing to ramp up our work. So I just want to make sure you have the resources that I touched on. We have an infrastructure website, which the link is here. The Inflation Reduction Act website. These websites are going to be updated very often with relevant information from our programs, opportunities for webinars, opportunities to learn more about the program, stakeholder engagement. So encourage you to visit those, learn more about the programs if there's something that piqued your interest today. And then below, we also have a funding opportunities website. This is sort of a living document that lists all of our bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act funding opportunities. This will tell you the programs, who is eligible, when the program is open, when they close. I think this is really helpful for folks as you try to monitor all of the vast amount of information that is coming out from EPA on these historic investments. So encourage you to visit those websites, bookmark those websites for future use. Just some of the sub websites I mentioned here too. These are links that you should be able to click on, learn more about the programs I touched on, whether they're climate pollution, greenhouse gas reduction fund, investments in school buses, water infrastructure. So a lot of resources out there. And then questions. For those that don't know, EPA is divided by regions. California falls into Region 9. We have a regional office there. They can be helpful for identifying grant opportunities, talking about individual projects and other resources. Sometimes we might have region-specific grant information, which you could learn more about. The regions can help you through there. There's also a number of links here to sign up for grants webinar training, grants update listserv, grants management. If you haven't worked with us before on grants, I encourage you to check out these things and learn more about what you need to do. My contact information is listed here, as well as grants.gov, sam.gov. If you haven't gone after federal resources in the past, you should familiarize yourself with those websites. You need to register at sam.gov, and that can take some time. So I encourage you to check that out and learn more about that process. All right, so that's it for me, and I think we're able to have some time for questions. But thanks again for the opportunity, and really appreciate the Congressman's office and all the work that they have done in this space, and we really value their partnership.
Thank you, Jack and Dr. Tejada, for your presentations. Now I would like to transition us to questions and answers. As a reminder, if you have a question, please drop it in the chat. And we're going to get to as many questions as possible. So please drop your questions into the chat, and then I will read them out. It looks like, Matt, you already answered a lot of the questions. So thank you for
I'm
that.
sorry.
No worries. Efficiency. I was impressed. Okay, there's a question here. This is for you, Dr. Tejada. Dr. Tejada, thank you for the information. I have a shovel-ready project in design now. What is the timeline from initial application, roughly October, November this year, to grant agreement and funding?
So as soon as we open it up, and again, our goal is to have the application window open up by the end of October. Even with a shovel-ready project, right, you're still going to have to, put it together in the requirements that we're going to have in the grant thing. I think realistically, it's probably going to take a month or so to do that, and we know that we're already going to get into the holidays. But as soon as you're ready, like if you can get it ready by December or January, whenever you're ready to put it in, you can put it in. And again, so the way it works at EPA, we can't set like a minimum score and just award stuff above a minimum score. We kind of have to look at what comes in and make determinations based upon kind of the population of proposals we get. And with this rolling application, that was actually one of the problems we had to solve for. So what we decided to do is, like, we'll probably have a 100-point scale on the competition, right? So any proposal that gets an 85 or above, we're going to immediately put that proposal into award. We're going to say 85 or above, you get it, it's yours, go for it. And that means you'll go straight into the awarding phase. Since there's a 3-year limit though on the actual grant, and that clock starts as soon as the award is made, we're really gonna push the applicants to make sure that before we sign the award, and that usually takes like a month or two at least, right? Because there's a negotiation, there's all the government, forms you got to fill out and the budget stuff, but we're really going to make sure that everything is as ready as possible while we're getting all those forms filled out before we hit that button, that everything is really lined up. So, realistically, if we open this thing up at the end of October, we don't think we'll make our first awards until probably end of February, early March. And then everyone else, like anybody that doesn't get an 85 or above, but is below that, right, we'll take those kind of month over month and we'll look at the rest of them and we'll make a determination. We'll kind of take the top slice off of everyone else that's below an 85. We'll award those. And then anybody that doesn't get an award, we'll immediately debrief them. We'll give them feedback on why they didn't score higher, and then invite them to come back in a couple of months and resubmit with a revised proposal.
Thank you, Dr. Tejada. We have another question. This one's for you as well. or whomever can answer it. When will we know which programs will provide forward funded opportunities for CBOs? Will this be in the NOFOs?
Yeah, as soon as the NOFO comes out, and I'm pretty sure we're going to allow for that. We've been talking about it. I don't want to say 100%. We're trying to make that happen. It's a matter of, can we make it happen with our legal requirements and everything else. We're trying to make that happen, but we will definitely have that detail in the actual notice of funding opportunity when it comes out. And also, as soon as we release the notice of funding opportunity, we'll start having assistance calls at least once a month during that 12-month open period. We'll have public assistance calls where anybody who wants to can call in, not to me, but to my staff that actually knows all the stuff and is writing the grant right now. And they'll be on those public assistance calls every month to answer those sorts of questions. And if there's confusion, or if people have more specific questions about, well, is this activity eligible? Is this thing eligible? They'll actually be able to tell you that is not, right? We don't want you wasting your time writing up a proposal if it contains things that we can't legally fund. So they'll be there to provide that sort of assistance, in addition to the expert technical assistance, that'll actually sit down with you. And those are going to be done by a contractor. They'll actually sit down with you and make sure, like, your project pencils, right? That all the financials are good and the project's developed. So there's going to be lots of assistance and a lot of information about how to access that assistance once we release the funding opportunity next month.
Thank you. The next question, what is the minimum and maximum amount to apply for?
So for the big grants to actually do the implementation scale activities, it's going to be $10 million as the minimum and $20 million as the maximum. Now there is going to be, and I didn't mention this before, but in the statute, there's a really clear section that talks about engagement activities between communities and the government. And a lot of the feedback we got while we were designing the grant from community leaders and others was, hey, some of us, like we might want to put in a grant that does all the implementation stuff, but some of us, like, the big thing we want is we want to develop like a citizens advisory council with some training, just so citizens can engage their city or their port or their state or anybody else. So there is actually also going to be a separate track. So because those other, the $10 to $20 million projects, again, they have to be multifaceted. You have to actually be doing implementation scale activities. But if a community partnership wants to just do engagement stuff, there's going to be a separate track that will fund projects between $1 and $3 million, $1 and $3 million, that just does the engagement stuff, right? Because that's really important. That's a critical part of justice, is meaningful involvement between the community and the government. So we'll fund just those engagement specific activities between $1 and $3 million.
Thank you. Next question, where will there be opportunity for small businesses focusing on environmental justice, food justice, and land management justice?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we really hope, that those small businesses will be partners on proposals from community-based organizations and their other primary partners. We can't legally fund, though, we can't legally fund a proposal that is mainly put in by a for-profit organization, whether it's a small business or not. Like, that is very clearly written in the statute. So a business, can be a service provider or a contractor or a partner on the community proposal, but the community has to be the one to put it in and submit it. It can't be the small business. But this is an area, right, where if I know in a lot of communities, sometimes it's that small business is really kind of the engine of that community. So the small business could really be the motivator to say, hey, local faith organization or city or, local academic institution, hey, let's get together. Right, there's this grant we've heard of, but we need, we want to work together so y'all can apply for this and we can do this project. So the small business can be kind of a motivator for it, but the small business itself can't actually apply for it. It can just be a partner to the application.
Thank you. You mentioned, the question is, you mentioned September 2026 as the grant performance deadline. Is that correct? For a March 2024 grant, that's less than 3-year performance period.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably said that in a little confusing way. So there's 2 dates to keep in mind. I have to spend all of this money by September 30th of 2026. If any of this money is still in EPA on October 1st of 2026, it disappears, right? Or it goes back to the Treasury or whatever happens to imaginary dollars, right? So I have to spend all of the money by September 30th of 2026. Even if I give out a grant on September 29th or September 30th of 2026, the grantee still gets 3 years from that date to implement it, because I've obligated that money to that grantee on that date. So the grantee, even if I don't know if we'll still have money by then. Like, I'm going to try to spend the money as quickly as I can, because there's a huge need out there for these dollars right now. But if we still have money into 2026, grantees at that point will still get their full 3 years. It's just I have to get it all off of my book by September 30th of 2026.
Thank you. Next question. Are there funding opportunities for local governments in California?
Yeah, so the local governments across the United States are an eligible entity. So any local government, any tribal government, or any academic institution across the entire United States, as long as they have a community organization as a partner, they can all apply for these grants. And we're even, especially since we're talking about California here, we will fund activities in Mexico. We're going to use the U.S. government. We have kind of a standard approach to working in the border, the U.S.-Mexico border. So we're not going to fund Mexican organizations. We're not going to fund Mexican-based organizations, but we appreciate for U.S.-based organizations in the border area, they do activities on both sides. So we're going to fund activities that take place on both sides of the border. It just has to be led by a US-based organization, and the activities have to be within 100 kilometers of the border. And that's a pretty standard kind of approach for US programs to be able to fund stuff in the border area.
Thank you. That's great. Next question, where are the TC/TAC locations? And where can you obtain their contact information?
So we don't have their numbers up online yet, but you can find, if you can just Google Tic Tac, or I can put the website in there. And there's a website at NEPA that gives you all of the primary hubs as well as all of their partner spokes. So like in California, San Diego State University is the primary Tic Tac in the state of California. Actually, for Region 9, for EPA's Region 9, which is California, Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands, we actually have 2 in Region 9, because the applications from both San Diego State University and the University of Arizona, they had a lot of great partners throughout the rest of Region 9 in Arizona, in Nevada, as well as, I think it was San Diego State had some good partners in Guam, and University of Arizona had some good partners in Hawaii. So even though the hubs are in San Diego and Tucson, they have partners throughout the rest of kind of California and out into the Pacific Islands. But you can find all that information on the website if you just Google EJ Tic Tac.
How are we doing on time? Are you guys still available for a couple more questions?
Yeah, I'm okay for a couple more minutes.
Oh, okay. Let's go to would a department that runs water treatment plant projects be considered a community partner?
No, a department that does that, like a utility, that would be an institution of local government. So utilities certainly are local government. They would need the community-based organization to be the partner. And we're trying to be pretty flexible on what community-based organization is. It can be a 501c3, right? It could be a state recognized or even a tribally recognized nonprofit organization. It can be faith-based. It can be, a local food pantry, or it can be the economic development nonprofit like a CDFI or a housing coalition, right? It just has to be like, we're not funding we're not funding the big environmental groups. We really want to fund, local community-based organizations. So even if it's not 501c3, right, however that organization is kind of legally organized or chartered, we're going to be as flexible as we can, but we're not going to be so flexible, right, that a bunch of illegitimate organizations can apply for the funding. We really want it to be an authentic community organization.
Thank you. We have a couple more. Does the business restriction also apply to the smaller subgrants of 100,000 to 300,000? Also, can a summary of web pages be shared in the follow-up email? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we can get all the
Yeah.
web links out to folks. But no, a business cannot. And again, that is ruled by our statutory authorities. I have never received statutory authority to provide money to small businesses. All of the money that we are able to fund, I have the EJ program at EPA has for a long time. We've had the statutory authority to fund community nonprofits and states and tribes and local and territorial governments. It was actually the Inflation Reduction Act that for the first time, gave us the opportunity to fund all academic institutions. But I do not have any authority to directly fund businesses or for-profit enterprises. And I mean, EPA has some things for that, especially our pollution prevention grants. Some of our waste grants for RCRA or other things can fund for-profit businesses, but the EJ grants cannot. You have to be kind of a sub-partner to a community organization and one of their other partners.
Great. I'm going to two more questions. Is there an opportunity for small nonprofit to receive a grant to replace gas appliances like a hot water boiler, air conditioning, and commercial kitchen equipment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think something like that, especially, there's so many rebates out there, right? I was actually just talking to some folks about this yesterday. There's a lot of rebates out there, but a lot of people in our communities, right, they can't front the cost to buy the equipment and then wait for the rebate, right? Because it's still thousands of dollars to get like a better air conditioner or a better heater or a better boiler. So yeah, a project could come in, especially if it was working with the local electric utility, that'd be great. Come in and be like, hey, we're gonna front the cost of, community members to actually install the equipment. That's an indoor air quality benefit, that's in the grant. It's a climate change benefit, that's in the grant, right? And then the homeowner can go get the rebate and pay the grant back, and it can turn into the kind of a revolving, like that would be awesome, right? So those sorts of things are eligible activities for sure. But again, I would really, once the competition comes out, read it, join one of those assistance calls where my staff will be on, and they'll be able to really more precisely than me answer those questions.
Thank you. Last question. You mentioned faith-based organizations, but I didn't catch if they're eligible to apply for the grant. Are they eligible to apply for the grant or only as a partnership?
No, faith-based organizations, again, as long as they're nonprofits and they're kind of community-based, right? Local community, like we're not going to give the Catholic Church of America a grant, but local community, faith-based organizations or something, we would consider those, and that's part of the EJ program's history. A lot of the environmental justice movement itself is a very faith-driven, faith-rooted movement. So faith-based organizations have always been kind of eligible recipients of our EJ grants. It's more about having that local community-based connection, not just being some big national nonprofit or something.
Thank you, Dr. Tejada. Thank you, Jack, for making the time to come out and present on grant opportunities through the EPA. Thank you to the participants for joining us today. We wish you all the best in your work to uplift your communities. If we were unable to get to your question, we will do our best to respond to you via email. We have captured the questions, but we also, since this is a region-wide grants workshop ranging from participants from Northern California and Southern California, we encourage you to please reach out to your member of Congress if you have additional questions. If you're a constituent of Congressman Tony Cárdenas, you're welcome to reach out to our office as well. Thank you all very much. May you all have a good rest of your days.
Thanks, y'all.